Hey everyone, it's your boy Reefy. We're back here again. Today is free rune removal. God. So in case you guys don't know, the first Saturday of every single month we do get a free rune removal. Now, I do believe if the Saturday is before the 5th, I think it's the 5th, then it isn't free rune removal. They move it to the next Saturday. But sometimes if a Hall of Heroes is going to be on that Saturday, then they will just have it before the 5th. So just keep in mind, they will announce it a few days before the actual free rune removal. So just watch out for that. It will be in the event page right down here. Let's load it up. Come on. And it's not loading. Okay, well, it'll be in the event page. It will be there, so check it out. Make sure you keep it, like, in your head so you don't miss out on it, because you don't want to miss out on free rune removal. So now, how are we going to utilize free rune removal to, like, the best? You only have 24 hours to really do all of the rune stuff, and I know it can be complicated. Some people use Rune Optimizer. I personally don't like to use that because I don't want to superpower one specific monster. I want to superpower everything, and I need to, balance the runes around. So basically, you should make a list of all of your monsters, and you should put down the monsters that you absolutely do not want to change or need to change. So for mine example, Varad, I like his stats where they're at. He's absolutely perfect for me. Everything that is on him is just perfect. I don't need it on any other monsters, and he just has really nice stats. So I leave him as he is. I don't touch his runes, even on free rune removal. Even stuff like Tower, I don't really move his stuff either, and that's just mainly because there's only like 1 or 2 runes that I really need to change. And it's also good if you do get new runes to put that down on the list on, like, okay, yeah, I need to change these types of monsters and these types of monsters. And then, yeah, so basically you want to keep in mind the monsters that you do not want to change. Now, of course, some will definitely have upgrades, like my Theomars was pretty well runed, and now I switched out this rune. I switched out a little bit crit rate for accuracy for testing. We'll see if I actually keep it or maybe change it. I don't know yet. I haven't decided. Depends on what I roll on this plus 12. But yeah. Okay, so now that you have all of the monsters that you don't actually need to unrune, what are you going to unrune? You basically want to go through every single monster that's not well runed, or at least not runed to like the perfect status where you like absolutely are not going to change anything, and you just want to strip it completely. So this is actually a new build I'm going to be trying this month. I had something else last month, attack crit damage attack, and I didn't like it, so I'm going to try speed crit damage attack and see if I can just make that work. He'll be around 180 speed. Now, I'm just showing you guys specific examples from my monster list. So I didn't like Tyrone. That's why I actually just unruned him completely and then re-runed him during this free rune removal. I unruned literally everyone that didn't have the best possible runes that I could basically have for their builds. So stuff like Galleon, Praha, and like Theomars and Poseidon, Rena, basically those types of monsters that I already had pretty much perfectly ruined, they're untouched for the most part. But stuff like Orion that I want to mess around with, Vigor, Arnold, Vertihil a little bit, Hua, definitely Spectra, like those kinds of monsters where you're just kind of messing around with their builds, testing them out. This is the day to test them out. So don't just remove 1 or 2 runes, just strip down almost everything, and then that way you have everything back in your rune spots and you can prioritize monsters. So how should you prioritize monsters now? Well, I always leave my dungeon teams untouched, or at least I always make sure that the dungeon teams I have will be runed first. So Hua was runed first. I put her runes on. They're not upgraded, but that's always why you shouldn't do what I do. You should always save mana before you go into free rune removal. You should save about 1 million, I would say. 1 million is a good start. Or like 500,000 if you're lower level. So then you want to rune up your dungeon team. You pick one dungeon. I would say either dragons, if it isn't mid-game or higher. If you're a little bit like beginner level, then just do giants. But if you're further into the game, either do dragons or necro, because that's going to give you the most mana. Then you're going to want to rune up one of the dungeon teams for that dungeon, or at least make sure that they're well runed enough to do that dungeon. And then that way, so you see right here I have my Necro team all somewhat ruined. They're not fully upgraded, but decently enough where I can actually do it. And then that way, when you finish it, since you're going to have a lot of runes that are not fully maxed, you can do the dungeons consistently, and then you can level up the runes that you're missing. That way you don't strip down all of your dungeon teams, and then you can't do dungeons anymore, and then you're like, well shit, I don't have any mana stones, can't upgrade them, now it's no free rune removal, and I'm screwed. Yeah, you don't want to do that. So you want to focus on the dungeon team that you're going to be using for that specific dungeon for mana farming. Then I would say once you do that, I would focus on mainly like Rift, Arena, or other parts like that. I mainly focus on Arena, and once I get Arena and Guild Wars all figured out, so like this one's Rift monster that I just re-runed and stuff like that, pretty good, etc, etc, Guild Wars, and you kind of just play around with that a little bit. And it's also just a quick note, if you guys are doing damage dealers, if you head over to Trial of Ascension, a lot of people test out their runs in Famon. I don't know why people do that. People test out their stuff in like Scenario and stuff. Don't do that. That's just such a waste of energy. Come over here, test it on Trial of Ascension. You'll notice that when you complete a stage, it does not cost any energy to go into that stage. A lot of people know this. I think people just forget. So if you want to test out something like, oh, I want to test out a new rune build that I did for Tyrone, right? I did a rune build for Tyrone. You can just plop Tyrone in, throw him in there. You can put in Galleon to test out that kind of damage or like other buffs. And you just pick a stage enough where you can go first or stuff like that. And then that way you can actually test his damage if he's going to be like critting or other stuff like that. And that is a good surefire way to test the damage, but also it doesn't cost you any energy. So that's a really good way to test the rune builds and all that type of stuff. So just keep that in mind. And if you're like, oh, Trial of Ascension is just so much higher stats and blah, 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 blah. I mean, you could go down all the way to the beginning. Seriously, like it's perfect. It's just 1 through 100 different stages and levels of the stages to test out. Okay, you just got to find the perfect stage for you to test out your rune builds for like that type of level that you're at. So, alright, after you do that, I would say once you start working around with your runes, make sure that you got proper rune builds. It's best to not leave any monsters unruined unless you have planned future rune builds for them, or they're just not, you don't have the runes for them, right? So stuff like my second Lucian, I just don't have the runes for him right now, but I have a planned rune build for him, so I'm going to be using that. And once you guys get those types of runes, if you still have monsters that are unruined or that you don't use, I would just start throwing damage runes on them. So I don't use Shiho, but I definitely threw on some damage runes. I don't use Julian, but I threw on some somewhat damage runes that I need to upgrade. I don't use Amin, but I did throw on damage runes. And that's because even though you can't use them or you won't use them in some parts of the game, you can use them in World Boss. And that's how I'm able to hit, I do S rank, A, and then B+. So I'm climbing up there. I'm getting closer and closer to 100, the top 100. This week I didn't really, do much. I didn't attack right away, and I think I missed 3 of those swords for the boss thing. But yeah, so you want to basically rune up everything that you've got. At least if you're not going to be using them at all, rune them up for damage and use them for world boss. That's the best thing you can do. Once you have everything runed up, and this is going to be a little bit tedious, you don't have to do this, but I love doing this myself. I go through every single rune build and I look at the stats and I calculate all the stats. So this one is going to be weak. So I will probably unrune him before the end of this free rune removal. This one is actually not too bad. I tested the damage already and it's pretty good. So I think I'm just going to leave him and then max his rune, his slot 3 out. I also have a few here that I'm not too happy with that I will be unruning. And once you unrune them, you can throw on other runes. So I have all of my top priorities runed. And then the rest of them, I do have like some kind of weird builds like this, or like Katarina, a weird Fatal Guard build. Even though her stats are pretty decent, she'll be like 170 crit damage 180 crit damage more or less on fatal runes. That's not bad at all. But yeah, just as an example, you just want to throw on builds that can work for certain situations, only if you're going to be using them in like very, very, very specific situations. So just to recap, since this isn't really a huge difficult video, it's always up to the player's discretion on what type of runes they want to use. Just to utilize free rune removal to the best of your ability, you should spend the first few hours of free rune removal basically unruning almost everything. Anything that you are not perfectly happy with, unrune it completely, and then start prioritizing certain monsters like your dungeon team, your arena team, and your guild war team, all of that. And then once you throw everything all on those guys, all the perfect runes, because you might have a rune hidden away on some kind of mediocre monster and you don't know about it. Once you do that, you can start focusing on your world boss monsters. You can start focusing on TOA monsters. Some TOA monsters, they don't need the best runes, which is why I can run like a 5-star rune on Varad, just as an example. Or like Mav, I can run this weird setup, speed, HP defense, and his stats aren't, incredible, but it doesn't matter because it's just for Trial of Ascension, and you don't really need that incredible stats for Trial of Ascension. So just make sure you guys prioritize the right things. Also, don't forget that you can use Trial of Ascension to test out your damage, your healing properties, all that kind of stuff. This is one thing that I did test out on Trial of Ascension many times, and that was getting the speed tuning perfect with Theomars and Chasun. If I load this up really quick, I'll show you what I mean. But the speed totem works for this. So if you guys are actually wanting to test out speed, you can actually test out in Trial of Ascension. You don't need to do it in scenario. The situations in scenario mode are the exact same in Trial of Ascension. And it's 0 energy. It has 0 cost. So you can back out and go back in however many times you want without wasting energy. I love it, okay? So that's my little secret for you guys. Test it out there. Go through, test out every single monster, check out their stats, calculate their stats, and by the time you get to the last few hours of free rune removal, you should do one last sweep through, double check everything, check if there's any runes hidden away. You should at least have, I would say, around 300 or 400 runes saved up for free rune removal, and then you should mix and match and all that type of stuff. Don't forget, you should also sell runes that you are not using. If they are not good runes in your eyes, you should not keep them, because mana stones are very useful, and they will help you upgrade these runes after you put them on your monsters. Alright guys, I hope that helps. It's not too long of a video, but that's basically my trick to utilizing free rune removal to the best. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys next time. See ya.